wanted to show you something. This beautiful, I don't know if you can see it, maybe somebody can hold it up for me. This very beautiful, I think, an interesting object, is something that was given to us that was used by Yuba Manufacturing. This is wood, and it was a pattern to make a part for some heavy manufacturing equipment. I imagine that today the F3 rapid prototype people could produce that very economically, very quickly, and without the refinement and enhancement that had to be used for that. I just want everybody to remember future history is happening today, and we need your support because we believe ourselves to be, and we hope you believe us to be, an entity that doesn't just collect, preserve, and exhibit historical artifacts. We believe that we are an integral part of community expression, cultural expression, identity, pride, and a community building exercise.
The sustainability program, which takes funding through the Good Neighbor Steering Committee agreement, takes funding from Valero and utilizes it to assist businesses in retrofitting their existing buildings to be able to make them available for their type of business activity and also make them greener. And we're one of the first in the state that really took advantage of that, and we received an award for that. I cannot take credit for that. I have to give it to my staff and those who worked on it. But
thank you very, very much, Elizabeth. You know, I have to say I am truly the luckiest supervisor, I'm sure, on the face of the earth because I represent the city of Benicia. And you know, every time I come here, I am so overwhelmed by the kind of progressive programs, by the community commitment, by how people kind of come together and look to the future as just one of the many things that they do. And so I just want to say that when I walked in here tonight, not really knowing what it was going to look like or what to expect, I'm sure there's many of the rest of you here that were in the kind of the same position that I was, and go, wow, this is just so smart, so innovative, and what a great way to talk about clean technology and really kind of the long-term improvements that we can all make in our community. And you know, I have to say too that you know, I always sometimes think that Solano County is so truly lucky to have the city as part of the county, and that what I hope over time is that the kind of things that are being done here will begin to move into some of the other cities that we have in the county. And you know, and at the forefront of it, I know that it will happen if we could put Constance in charge.
It's also really great seeing new faces, and that's the whole concept here. Let's bring new people in. We can learn, you can learn, and we can work together. And ultimately, that's what it's all about, is working together to achieve sustainability. One of the things that occurred to me about being in here is that these 1850 stone walls must echo with the sounds of our industry. And the city, with the start of the Pacific Steamship Company, was the first industrial facility in California in 1847. So we have a long and proud history with industry. Benicia has led the way on so many things. As the city manager mentioned, we're often noted as the first in many ways. And so we consider ourselves the leader now for the transition of the economy as that post-industrial economy into the innovative and creative economy known as Generation E. And Generation E is the empowerment, the entrepreneurship, and the education that we all must have in order to move forward in the 21st century. Now, about 40 years ago, according to my calculations, the environmental movement captured the passion of many people, and they advocated for laws to protect our air and water for public health purposes, and also to leave a healthy natural resources legacy to future generations. These past efforts focused correctly on kind of the end-of-pipe technology, things that would clean up the environment. As a matter of fact, our very own Valero has, thanks to the Good Neighbor Steering Committee, installed in, I think it was 2011, the state-of-the-art sulfur scrubber, which reduces the sulfur that was emitted by about 98%, which is a pretty awesome figure. So in Benicia, we're approaching the environmental challenges with a different approach, and it's the emerging approach, and you're going to hear about it from our guest speaker, and that is that we need to be more efficient and more effective in how we do business. It's a very important concept to get across, and that's what I'm hoping you will get out of tonight's presentation. I'm sure you will, actually. Clean tech, what does that mean to us? For clean tech is a term that really is applied to those businesses that are working more effectively and efficiently. And at the end of the day, they produce less pollution and for most people who are concerned about climate change, less and fewer greenhouse gases. It's kind of eliminating or at least minimizing those ecological adverse impacts that many of us care about. But at the same time, it's hand in hand, like ham and eggs. It goes together with a more productive operation. And that's exactly why we celebrate clean tech. It's good for business, it's good for the environment. Now, it's my extreme pleasure to segue into my introduction to our speaker tonight, who is David Haygood. I cannot think of a better person to open our first CleanTech Expo than David, because he and IDEO represent the cross-cutting creativity, design, innovation with the intersection of manufacturing and production located here in Benicia. We celebrate the Benicia arts and manufacturing communities that meet at that intersection, and that is the future in the transition in our economy for Generation E. David Haygood is a partner at IDEO based in another city in the Bay Area at this time, who I will not name. And as Vice President of Client Advocacy with more than 14 years, I found out, of IDEO experience, he concentrates on solving business problems for the firm's long-term clients. IDEO noted in the best-selling book, The Art of Innovation, as the world-famous design firm using strategies to foster innovative thinking throughout an organization and overcome the naysayers who stifle creativity. As a practicing I can't hear no, I must read the short description of a naysayer. Quote, "The role of the devil's advocate is nearly universal in business and government today. It allows individuals to step outside themselves, raise questions and concerns that effectively kill new projects and ideas, while claiming no personal responsibility. Nothing is more potent in stifling innovation." So tonight, we have our very own Mr. Haygood from IDEO to share how to grow and nurture the culture of innovation and innovative thinking. Prior to joining IDEO in 1999, he managed multifunctional teams for Hexcel Composites, and believe it or not, we actually have a history. I have a history with Hexcel. It's just really funny. And Specialized Bicycle Components, that again, but not Raycom Corporation. Haven't done anything with them, or Atari. As a writer of a Specialized Ruby bicycle, I was delighted to learn that IDEO was involved in the development of Aqueduct, a pedal-powered tricycle concept that transports, filters, and stores water for developing world. This is a must-see thing. You can go on the webpage unless he has a PowerPoint tonight that shows it. And the model was designed and constructed over a 3-week period for a contest hosted by Google and Specialized Bicycles. Industries where David managed technical or sales organizations include automotive, recreation, aerospace, and consumer electronics. And as a point of contact for public sector and policy programs, was it Christine? For policy programs, he also works in the public sector with the Transportation and Security Administration, Department of Energy, Intel Community, and NASA. Now this is a really more interesting part. Memorable experiences for Mr. Haygood include his role as an Army combat photographer in Vietnam, a leader of chapel services in Maximum Security Prison, and a triathlete swimming from Alcatraz to San Francisco. there's a theme in there, you work on it. Luckily, Mr. Haygood did not need to swim here, but just come home to Benicia, where he lives, to be our speaker tonight. Tom Peters notes that, quote, a consensus is emerging that innovation must become part of every firm's job one, end of quote. And I would add the same for government at all levels. Time is short, there isn't a moment to lose, and fortunately, we have people like David Haygood and many of you to help leading the way. Let's welcome Mr. Haygood.
Really excited about this chance to talk to you about innovation and how it applies to sustainability. I really enjoyed seeing the different displays that people have, and we all know that we've all seen examples of where there's something that seems like a great idea, but it just doesn't get adopted. So what do you have to do to get get people to change behaviors and adopt things? That's really what our business is. So what I have done is I want to break this into two pieces. One of them is kind of getting you educated and talking a little bit about innovation and the process of coming up with big ideas. And then the other half is going to be how it applied to a specific product that you all probably recognize. So that's right. There we go. So first off, IDEO is a business. We've been in business about 35 years. We have 600 people. We have an office in Palo Alto, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, Boston, London, Munich, Mumbai, Shanghai, and Singapore. And so an innovation consultancy, so big companies come to us when they need new product ideas or new service ideas, or they want to do organizational transformation. Next slide. Everybody in here has owned or used something that's been designed by IDEO. If you own, we invented the squishy handled toothbrush. There's an earth shaker for you. Swiffer, we've done work with security with TSA. Mouse, we designed the first mouse for Apple and the first mouse for Microsoft. So it's kind of products that touch pretty much everybody. Next one. This is propaganda. What basically this says is we're probably the most highly decorated of our type of business. Most of you, I assume most people in here have not heard of our company, but if this were a room of the Fortune 50 CEOs, all of them would know us, because that's the level we end up being able to work, fortunately. Next slide. Very much like the three-legged stool that Constance mentioned, we too have really the exact same ones. There's three different ways to come in and approach a problem, and entry points through either the business model, or through the technology, or through the people. The area that we've specialized in is people, the human part. Like, how do you discover the unspoken needs that people have and tie the product to that? Next one. So several things that, some kind of guiding principles around innovation. And so these are sort of the truths we believe to be self-evident. Next. Don't ask. What that means is we find that when you just go out and ask people what they do, it's not very helpful. You know, like when we're doing the toothbrush, for example, ask people, how do you brush your teeth? People say, well, I brush my teeth for 2 minutes, 30 seconds per quadrant. Blah, blah. If you go watch them, it's never that. And they're not lying. They're not trying to be tricky. It's just we just remember things in a different way. So next slide. So we're working in this case. We're working with a hospital to improve the process of going through the emergency room. And so we check in one of our guys and claim that he has a broken leg, and he carries a little camera there, and all the way, he's filming what he sees as he's going through, and narrates, kind of that little voice that's in the back of your head narrating all the time. He captures that. Other times, like on the other side of the slide, you see a journal, a photo journal that we gave to the nurses, and because what we found is, like Henry Ford said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So what our job is to get behind the faster horses answer and come up with something that's a real need, but one that people can't think of. Next slide. So going broad. it means that if we're designing something, let's say for a computer interface, we don't just focus on that. We focus on what were people doing before they came to the computer, and do they work, when they do their work, and then what are they doing after? An example? Next slide, I'm sorry. So the client in this case was not NASCAR. The client was a bunch of trauma surgeons. What they wanted to do was improve the process of how they did their operation in the trauma surgery. We do what's called analogous observations. Is rather, yes, we went and studied and benchmark trauma centers, but what we also do is try to figure out how can we go wide, find somebody else who has the same kind of problem. And in the case of the doctors, it's high pressure. There's a half a dozen things that are the most common things to happen. There's a certain set of tools that they pull. It's a very teamwork-oriented thing. So we back up and say, okay, where else does that exist? Well, NASCAR pit crew. So we took the doctors out and put them behind the wall at the NASCAR race and had them watch what the pit crew was doing. And then we did a brainstorm session and said, okay, what would you see? And if you applied those principles in the trauma center, what would that give you? What would that give you? And they came up with some really breakthrough ideas. Designing for behaviors is often you'll hear people doing demographics and say, okay, I need to design a car that's for men between 25 and 35. Well, the only thing they may have in common is birth dates. You need, what are something else that you can get a handle on? And so what we do is go after, next slide. This is impossible to see. This is a lie chart, but so Bank of America came to us and they wanted to get people to use their debit cards more. And again, like Henry Ford, if I went and asked people, what do you want to use your debit card more? You say, well, give me something for free, or let me skip payments, or something like that. So what we do is we went out, we sent our cognitive psychologists out and said, and they went out with a piece of paper and said, here, draw your money. And so they had about 30 people like scratching their heads, and it looks about like you're looking at me right now. This is kind of like, what do you mean, draw your money? And so they do these little stick figures. And so we had about 30 of those, and then we kind of started finding piles. And then we saw like how this was framed. And I won't go through this in a lot of detail, but the framing this way is how engaged were people with their money. Because here again, we're trying to get at behaviors. And here is like how long or short-term view. So this guy up here in this quadrant here, he's over here, so he's got a low engagement, but a very long-term view. And how do you know? From the picture, it's like, he's got a picture of him here, and then boom, there's an explosion, and then a little statement of what happens in the future. So he's got this wish for things to happen, but he's just counting on like a grandmother dying and giving him a fortune. This other picture that you can't see is like very highly engaged, long-term view. So these are people, and the drawing is, everybody's drawn to scale, they got the glasses on, you can see dollars flowing out of a rental property and actually into mom's pocket, sort of like my family. But very, very detailed. It was a very detailed drawing and showed that they were highly engaged long-term. Over here is somebody who was like highly engaged with a short-term view. And what you saw there was the names of all the accounts, but it didn't have any sense of where it was going. Then down here you have low engagement, short-term viewers, people kind of like, unfortunately like myself, which is the way this drawing was, I have two piles. I have a pile of money and I have a pile of stuff. And you can see by the arrows next to it, as the pile of stuff goes up, pile of money goes down. That's my plan. So out of that we found some particular behaviors of people wanting to save. We ended up developing a program called Bank of America Keep the Change, which has been a very hugely successful thing for them. Sorry that was so fast. Next. Prototyping is, we're very big on this notion of prototyping, is that not let something bake forever in your head and then put it out on paper. It's as quick as you can, make some kind of a model or something that you can just try the idea out. Next. So we were doing stuff around airport security and how to get bad guys to stand out. And so we just rented a warehouse and we just built the furniture. So rather than getting the machinery and all that stuff, we just, in a couple of hours, had our technicians take foam core and hot melt glue and just build it up. Then brought in people to be passengers, have them pass through it and play act and so on. So you just get it out of people's heads. And so we don't let things you spend a lot of time there baking. We want to get them out. That's great. We're doing great. So I'm not going to go through the details of this, but it's really kind of an interesting chart. That what we do is, rather than just like, think, if we're trying to, let's say you're trying to design a new innovative space, and you visited Pixar, or you went to Disney or something like that, and say, well, okay, they had beanbag chairs and they had bikes hanging from the ceiling. That's what I'm going to do. What we do in innovation practices, you go out and do those observations, like the NASCAR and stuff like that, and then really try to abstract it and get these higher level insights of, like, besides what people have said, what do they really mean that they're not articulating, and then drop back down onto it, whereas with brainstorming for high volumes of ideas and prototyping, you're quickly prototyping, as we mentioned, and then ending up with a solution set. Next. Okay, so that's the points I wanted to make there on design thinking is the idea of a multifunctional team, getting the inspiration from people, drawing heavily on intuition, quickly prototyping. And the prototyping, we call it build to think. Is build stuff, just get it out there because it lets you view your problem in a different way. So let's show how this applies to a actual project. Ford came to us a couple years after the Prius came out, and they brought this, the window sticker, and said, okay, if you're buying one of these Prius cars, the promise here is like 60 miles per gallon. Unfortunately, nobody was getting it. People were getting something like, somewhere around 42 miles per gallon or something like that. So there's a lot of disappointment in that. Now, Ford had their own technology. Now, was their technology better than Toyota's? Probably about the same. But they came and said, are there behavior changes that we can do so people will get more out of this investment? Next. And how do we help them? Next. So, kind of like going to the NASCAR thing, yes, we go out and we talk to people who are going to be potential buyers of these cars, but we learn more from people who aren't going to buy the cars, who maybe hate cars. Going out and talking to these folks, you're never going to sell them a car, but they've solved problems in a way, or they've dealt with issues in a way that you're going to learn something. So we had this guy named Max, we called him Max. See his sign, it says drive 55 miles per hour. He's one of these knuckleheads that you see on the road, with like a whole bunch of radio antennas on top of your car. Or he has the sign up there, he puts the sign up proudly in the window, don't go faster than 55. He's just a crusader for high mileage. He got 38 miles with a non-hybrid car. He got 38 miles to the gallon. And here's a picture of his car. It's just, swear to God, this old beater, he got 38 miles to the gallon out of this by his driving techniques. Now, we don't recommend all of his driving techniques, which included, when it was 100 degrees out, he drove with the windows up and the AC off. He drafts 2 or 3 feet behind trucks on the freeway, and he doesn't use the brake on turns. He does turns at 50 miles an hour. However, so in the innovation business, you find guys who solve problems in an interesting way, then you try to pull it back into the realm of practicality. So, but he had found behaviors that got high mileage out of a standard car that was probably in pretty crap shape. Next picture. So then we went out and found this other guy who's like, he refuses to own a car. He's like this real super green guy, bicyclist. He also is a competitive cyclist. And so we were asking him about, we go in these interviews and we ask him very open-ended kind of questions so they can just kind of ramble on. Like, how do you know when you're running out of gas? Or how do you know when you have 2 hours left for the race? And you just kind of, about his personal body fuel consumption. And he was kind of scratching his head and he said, well, what about this, you got one of these bike computers, how much more information would you want on it? He says, want more? He says, there's too much already. He says, I don't need more information, I need a coach. And that really struck us, like, okay, how do you make this, rather than just a bunch of information, how do you make it a coach to help them through? Next. So we got with the Ford guys and we made some quickie little prototypes. I'm sure probably half the people in this room know twice as much as what I do about hybrid cars. But you've got so you're part of the time you're operating off the battery, and then part of the time you can be operating off of gas. If it's off the battery, it's not costing you money. Once you start using gas, it costs you money. So the idea was we tried out this idea of a gauge that really gave you the target when you were hitting into gas, when it was costing you money. So you can feather it, the power up to that point, but past the point it's costing you. Same concept on the brake regeneration. The Fusion has two sets of brakes. It has the regeneration, where it's taking the resistance from the electrical resistance, and then standard friction brakes. So once you've applied the brakes, it's using the regeneration and charging the battery system up. Once you really lean on them, it starts uses the other brakes, which just is putting your energy as heat and just dissipating it and it's lost. So what you're trying to do is balance between the two of these, get up close. So we found that was a way, it was a real simplified way for people to kind of play the energy game. So we once proved that out, we gave that to the Ford engineers, and that's what they ended up doing. This is the way they ended up. Sometimes they have us design the whole physical part of the dashboard, but this was their work, and they did a good job. So it has the tachometer essentially for power, and then the regenerative brakes, and you could see them on there very graphically. Over on the far side, we added in kind of a more whimsical thing with some little vines that, as you're doing good, it grows more vines, and if you're doing bad.
Was that your guys' idea?
Yeah. Yes, it was our idea. So the car ended up getting the 2010 Car of the Year Awards, and that was for the gas version and the hybrid version, so it wasn't all hybrid. Next. But it had huge growth. It way exceeded their expectations in terms of sales. And this guy, Dan Neal, apparently he's big in the people who follow this. He's an influential writer. But he said, I managed without much trouble to get 52 miles to the gallon, which is really nice because the sticker, the promise was 41 miles to the gallon. So he was getting 11 miles to the gallon more than what is said on that sticker. And he said that perhaps the most valuable bit of software is the wetware, the stuff between the driver's ears. To that end, the Fusion Hybrid uses a delightful LCD instrument cluster with modules that coach drivers on how to save fuel. So I couldn't have written it better myself. Last one. So the point I'd like to take away is that well, you'll see a lot of great technologies, and some of them are going to die, not because the technology is not good, but we just haven't handled the human piece of it. And you can't go in and ask them what they want. You have to kind of pull back and read between the lines and try things. But the notion of design thinking is that if analytic thinking is taking the available options and then down selecting and coming up with the best one, design thinking is to create a broader set of options in the first place. So there we are. Thank you very much.